Ladies and gentlemen, the Institut National de l'Histoire de l'Art and the Château de Fontainebleau are delighted to welcome you. The round table we'll be hearing now is on Les Voix du Nord, the Northern Voices, the Sami artists. Just a piece of information. I'm the editorialist of Perspective, which has issued its last magazine on the Northern Voices and Sami artists, and this is available in the book fair of the Chateau. So I'd like to briefly present all our speakers. So sorry for the pronunciation of their names. So first we have Matti Aikio, who is a Finnish artist who rears deers, Finnish deer. She's at the Academy of Contemporary Art of Tromsø, and he works on the landscape in Sami boreal forest, which is threatened. We have Inger Blix Vammen, who is a Sami artist from Norway. She was trained in the US and in the UK. Her works were exposed in London at the Electrum Gallery. They were acquired by the Art Museum from North Norway at Tromsø. The Sami Parliament, the Art Council in Norway, the Spartanok, and other institutions, private and public. She is interested in migrations and intercultural transborder exchanges in the region of Barents. In her project, and the book is here on the table, she is one of the founders of the community at the origin of the festival Art Barents Spectacle. We also have Rosemary Hoover, who is a Sami Swedish artist specialized in duodji, which is the Sami decorative art, sculpture, and poetry. She's an activist for Sami rights. Her work project, object of research, is on the ill treatment of the Sami. She was nominated for the Literary Prize of the Nordic Council, and her work was part of the exposure Sami history in the US and Anchorage. She donated some of her work in the Museum of Art. And then you have Knut Ludgott. He has a master in art history at the Oslo University in Norway, a doctorate in philosophy at the University of Tromsø. He specialized in Nordic painting and European painting in the 19th century and the painting of landscapes and romantic history. His thesis on Scandinavian painting was published in the form of a monograph, and he was director of the Art Museum of Northern Norway in Tromsø from 2008 to 2016, director of the Kunsthal Valberg Museum. Today he's the director of the Nordic Institute of Art in Oslo. He's written a lot of books in Norwegian. I'm not going to pronounce the names, but there are some of them in English too. Paintings with Peter Balk and Marik Ingelborgs, and a book on Spigbernes. And our last speaker, Anne May Ollie, is director from the Rideau Dotar Museet in Norway. She has a diploma in curation, specialized in Sami, and she's also rearing deers with her husband.
I can understand that Norwegian and Sami names are difficult to pronounce in French. I'm very happy that the Nordic Institute of Art has been invited by the Festival d'Histoire de l'Art here at Fontainebleau to participate in this year's festival, and I'm in particular happy that we have been able to together curate this talk on about contemporary Sami artists and also on their traditions. And I'm very happy that we have these really distinguished groups of Sami artists, contemporary artists with us, and also to have such a learned colleague as Anne-May Ollie, who is the director of the Sami collections in Karasjok, as mentioned. And I would also like to add that that museum is important. It has a historical collection and but it also has a very important art collection. But it still needs an art museum, which I'm sure you will tell us more about later. So I thought we should do it that I would say just a few words about the situation with Sami contemporary art, starting where we are now today, and then Anne-Mai would talk more about the traditions and history, and then each of the artists will present their own works, different aspects of their own works, and after that we will have a conversation, and if there are questions from the room, we will take that. Lately, Sami artists have received a lot of attention on the international art scene. And I show you a little, there are a few examples here. The Documenta, number 14, which was held in Athens and Kassel in 2017, was perhaps the most important. There was also Sami Storage, which the Northern Norway Art Museum and the University Museum Tromsø organized together and showed in New York and in Anchorage in 2014. There was Let the River Flow, about an important political momentum in the late 1970s, the Alta Kautokeino controversy, which OCA, Office for Contemporary Art Norway, did, and which has also been shown several places in Scandinavia. And the most recent one, which is called History's 3 Generations of Sami Art, which is presently on show at the gallery at the Royal Palace. And I'm very immodest in mentioning that, since I have been the curator for it, and I'm also very proud to say that both Rosemarie Hova and Inger Willis-Kvammen are important artists in that show. However, this interest, we are here at Fontainebleau, there are artists at Documenta. It has not always been so. We know that the historical situation has meant that Sami culture was suppressed. I'm sure Anne-Mai will tell more about that. Sami language was not allowed to use. This was a part of the, in both the Norway and Sweden, as a sort of, we can safely call it a colonial policy. But there is, of course, a tradition. And as the first artist, we usually count Jon Savio, an artist working in the 1920s and 30s. And he worked mostly in woodcut, depicting Sami everyday life, like reindeer herding, as we see here. And I think it was very important that the Samis at this point, Sami people at this point, started to produce their own artists. You also had Skum in Sweden, and later Pirak and others came along to depict their own culture, their own identity. Before that, in the 19th century, you had like French artists. For those of you who listened to the former intervention, you would have seen a painting by François-Auguste Biard, which is a kind of an Orientalism where the Sami people are depicted as a strange people far away. So that is why it was important that the Sami started to produce their own artists. But when we say it's the first, I say we usually say it because, of course, there has been a tradition in the Sami culture long before Jon Savio came along, a tradition that manifested itself in craftsmanship, in duodji, but as a Sami is for a large part a nomadic culture, it left little traces. But I will now jump to the more recent history, the modern period, what is important to what we can say are the founding of the contemporary art scene. And of course, some of you may ask, what is Sami art? And a very well-known Norwegian artist, Synnøve Persen, she wrote an article with that title in the 1970s, What is Sami art? And her conclusion was that we cannot define that. And she hoped we would never be able to define that, because what Sami artists do are so individual as compared to what any other contemporary artist from in our global society would do. However, we can say that some artists, not all, because there are painters, there are video artists, and because we have artists working in video, that's why we have technical problems now, right, Matti? But and you have painters, you have installation artists, but we can perhaps deduct a few themes that will reoccur in the recent generation among Sami artists. Some of them, some are very interested in basing their art on tradition, traditional craftsmanship. Again, not all of them. Some are interested in history, identity, and I think the most important one, or one of the most important, who is a pioneer for this, is Ivar Joks. Ivar Joks was a very international-oriented artist. He studied in Copenhagen. He saw, what was his contemporaries, the Cobra artist, the beginning of conceptual art, installation art. But he was also very interested in his own traditions. He had also learned about duodji, about craftsmanship. So he merged these two worlds. So this is one of his installations called Number One, simply. It gives a vague association to old Sami religions without being very concrete. And it uses traditional Sami material, like wood, like the reindeer antlers, like the lasso made of leather. Here is another work. But he uses the installation, the contemporary ideas of installation art, but he adds the Sami materials, creating it, making it his own. And I think one aspect of Ivar Joks that is very interesting is that for him, his art was something ephemeral, something that could disappear after a while. He didn't mind if people would pick on his installations and move the objects in the installations. Of course, we are not allowed to do that in the museums anymore, but he allowed it when he was among us. And in this, yes, that can be said to be a part of the Sami tradition, where things are also ephemeral sometimes, but it can also be seen as a parallel to an artist like, let's say, Joseph Beuys, who also created installations that were not meant to be forever, but to sort of slightly disappear by force of nature. And I like also to mention one artist who works a bit in the same tradition, referring both to Sami materials and traditions, but also looking to international conceptual art, to installations. Hornspinna is not it's difficult to translate, but it's a kind of spider made with antlers, with leather, and of course, I think here in France you will see the parallel to our very well-known French-American artist, Louis Bourgeois, who is a great inspiration for this artist, actually. Also the feminist aspect. And then let's jump a bit. Around 1970, I'm not showing works by the two of you because you will show your own works in a little while. Around 1970, or in the 70s, art, culture, literature became very important to define a Sami identity. This had to do with the political situation, the enforcements of the Norwegian government, that included the suppression of language and culture, and what really made the controversy was in the late 70s, when the Norwegian government wanted to dam up a river. They did dam the river to create electricity, and Sami activists, together with also environmentalists, joined forces to demonstrate against this. It's a big conflict. Synnøve Persson was a part of a group called, often referred to as the Masi Group, the forerunner of the Sami Artists Organization. She also painted the first proposal for a Sami flag that was used in the early demonstrations and activism. Another artist in this group was Britta Marakat-Labba. Here you see a tapestry by her called the Crows. I think the meaning speaks, the image speaks for itself. Policemen, so she refers a bit to mythology, the crows as evil beings that would spy on humans for the evil forces, And here they are spies to the government, turning into policemen coming to arrest the Sami people. But also in her monumental frieze, history, she refers to images from Sami mythology as well as to everyday life praxis. And this is on show now at present in the Royal Palace Gallery in Oslo. It was also in Documenta, but I think this is the last time it will be shown outside Tromsø. You normally hangs at the University of Tromsø for a very long time, so you should really come to Oslo and see this exhibition. And then you can go up to Karasjok and visit Anne Mai's museum there. And I also like to, before I give the word to Anne Mai, to mention there are, of course, Sami artists from all the Scandinavian countries. Maria Helander from Finland, who often has this slightly humorous depictions. It's traditional, it's the Nordic, northern Scandinavian landscape which forms the basis of Sami life. But she's also a modern woman on her way home, perhaps from work, from a party. So she has this reference, as this also has to do with migration, with place, which I know Inger will talk more about. And another Finnish artist who is very occupied with this, with migration, with borders, because the Sami people is nomadic, you know, so the political borders might not be relevant for their culture. And you can also see Outi Pieski's work at the Venice Biennial this year, so if anyone is going there, you should really look out for her. And I will end with an artist called Juha Nango, who, this is his installation from Documenta in Kassel a couple of years ago, called European Everything, who refers to, you know, the European community, but also to the nomadic Sami culture, to northern Nordic materials such as sealskin, very politically incorrect, I'm sure, here in France. But again, to demonstrate that artists work in many, many different medias, and he's an artist that is very occupied with space, as you can see. He's originally trained as an architect. I think we have perhaps now tried to look at a few themes that might be relevant as a background, and a little bit about the situation in the contemporary art scene. And then I'm happy to give the word to Anne Mai Olli, who will talk more about the historical and traditional background. Thank you.
Well, yeah. I think it's necessary to explain who the Samis are, first of all. The Sami people live in the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and in northwest Russia. I am a Sami from northern Norway. The Sami people can be divided into 4 main groups across national borders. The main groups are the Southern Sami, who are both in southern Norway and southern Sweden. Lule Sami is in central Norway and central Sweden. Northern Sami is in northern Norway, northern Sweden, and northern of Finland. Eastern group is entirely in the east of Norway, in the border territories between Finland and Russia, and of course in Russia. The Samis is the indigenous people of Scandinavia, or the Nordic countries, the people of Sápmi. Today, the Sami in Norway live as Norwegian citizens, or Swedish and Finnish citizens. And a larger proportion have their means in livelihood in agriculture, fishing and reindeer herding. Reindeer herding has been one of the Sami traditional occupations and means of livelihood. The Sami were therefore traditionally a semi-nomadic people. As the Norwegian state appropriated Sami territories, as well as the other countries, we were forced to become more settled. Still, some Sami activities, like reindeer herding and some fishing, hunting, and gathering activities, include elements of our traditional lifestyle. We consider ourselves one people. But we have different Sami dialects, There are also differences in decor and in our traditional clothing. The Sami traditional clothing is the means of our non-verbal communication. By the decor of the gakti, our traditional clothing, we can tell where a person is from, which town or village they are from. And you can see that we have different kind of traditional clothing because we are from different places. The Sami have a living tradition, and duodji is a part of it. Okay. Duodji is often translated as Sami handicraft, but the term refers to both the act of making of crafts and objects by craftsmen, a person we call duodjar in Sami, and the finished work, a product of duodji. Professor in duodji Gunvor Guttorm, who is a duodjar herself, argues that the concept of duodji should be understood in the interface of indigenous traditional knowledge and working experiences and practice in crafts and art. The duodji concept expresses diversity and traditional techniques, and it covers widely various kinds of traditional working with different materials, like tree, horn, textile, wool, etc. Knowledge about mastering of several types of duodji is characteristic for Sami tradition and culture. Experts in duodji often collect and prepare materials for their crafts themselves. Searching for and gathering the materials is a part of the duodji work. Sophisticated knowledge about various natural materials is a part of duodji tradition. Many Sami artists have a background, have learnt traditional duodji, and by that they have knowledge in various kinds of natural materials, and the ways of managing these materials is a great advantage for their creative work. As the society has changed, the need for project and material objects has also changed. Nahpi, milking bowl, is a good example for this change. Nahpi is designed for specific purpose. It has been used for milking reindeer cows. I didn't know how to say that in English. This tradition is not in use any longer, but in the olden times, about, well, up 100 years ago, there was tradition of milking reindeer that are semi-wild. The form of the nahpi is designed for this challenging task. Nowadays, nahpi can be a contemporary product made primarily for an audience, for artistic purpose only. As you can see, one of the nappies on my pictures is the older one. That is not that artistic, not meant for the visual. And the other one is more like for the what do you call it, for the exhibition. Okay. From the objects used to the more sculptural aesthetic use, actually. The duodji goes more to the aesthetic instead of the practical function. That is more to decoration than to use. By making of nappi, the technique itself is still traditional duodji because it involves a lot of traditional knowledge, and thus a nappi for aesthetic purpose is still a duodji project. Not yet. Daida is a Sami term for modern art, while duodji designates traditional activities. In a Sami perspective, art is an inseparable part of Sami culture. Some of us like to use the term Daida duodji, to have a term for products in which interconnectedness of art and crafts is expressed and shown. Rosemaria Hova is both a poet and a trained textile artist, but in her artworks, duodji is present. She works with sculpture, installation, and objects often made of organic materials such as leather, hair, and soil. She used traditional Sami knowledge about skin preparations and other techniques. Through experimenting with the treatment of materials such as reindeer skin, she has developed entirely new methods that give the materials unique expressions. This is art. But in the background, we see clearly duodji and her knowledge about traditional techniques. This is also duodji, or duodji, if you wish. Looking from our Sami perspective, Sami arts can hardly be separated from duodji, especially when we are talking about arts in which wood, stone, skin, leather, silver, iron, and other organic materials are used. Both artists and researchers have recently increasingly questioning the validity of the distinction between the art and duodji. Eva Jux, as earlier mentioned, perhaps one of the most famous Sami artists through times, was already in the 1970s asking a rhetorical question. Why is it so problematic with definitions? Why is it necessary to separate arts and duodji from each other? If Sami artists use the traditional knowledge as the means of the artistic expressions, their arts are still a natural part of contemporary art and traditional Sami duodji as well. The Sami Museum in Karasjok, Sami Workadaverat, displays both cultural heritage, duodji and art, side by side in the exhibitions. And it has been like this since the museums opened in 1972. In our culture, taida, handicrafts, and art are not separated, like in Western society. This is the difference between the indigenous Sami art and Western art. But we still don't have the Sami Art Museum, even though we have the largest collection of Sami art. And that is an issue that we are still working with, and hopefully we will have a solution for the Sami Art Museum in not so many years. Thank you for your attention, and I will give the word to Ingebrigt Skammen.
Yeah, first I will say, Knut, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. It's a wonderful place, and except from the rain, it's a lovely day. So I have some photos from my last projects. As you can see, I do archives these days. These last years, I travel a lot. I go to areas where indigenous people live, and to areas where there are border issues, like in the south of Caucasus. I've been traveling a lot to see how the border between Armenia and Turkey is functioning, and it's also an area with lots of migration, as my area is. I live in the the northeast corner of Norway, very close to the Russian border. It's a multicultural area where the Sami people live. You could see the first traces of the Sami people very close to my home. I often travel across the borders. I have my art practice as doing travels, telling stories about the life where I come to, what I see, what I think is important. And I make it into photos and objects. And people call my objects memorabilia because it's memories about the places I've been, the life I've seen, and the values which I cherish. Is that cherish? My English is limited, but it's better than talking Norwegian to you, so I try my best. I've traveled a lot in the Nenets area. In our region, I live in the middle of Sápmi, but you could also call the region, due to political terms, the Barents region, which is the north of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. So northwest Russia is part of the Barents region. And there are 3 indigenous groups in northwest Russia. It's the Sami, and the Nenets, and the Weps. And the Nenets people are living on both sides of the Ural Mountains. I've been visiting them in the northern side. You could call it North Siberia. It's not correct, but it's almost correct. And I was so lucky I could go with a helicopter from Archangels 4 hours out to Kapkaninskaya tundra. It's the half peninsula, and it's very what we would call remote. And in Norway, the Sami people are living very modern, you could say. You agree? There are electricity, there are snow scooters, but what I saw at the Kapkaninskaya tundra was without all this modern stuff. It was like before, like in the old days, and they lived very nomadic, like they used to do before in Norway. And to follow that group, I was visiting a group for around 50 people, from small to old people, and they moved around each third week to find a new place for the reindeers to eat and for themselves to stay as long as the reindeers had food. And I tried to document what I saw. Here's a little girl called Vika. And the language you see down there is not Russian, it's Nenets language, which is not spoken by so many, so it's more or less starting to die out. And Vika, her dreams were the tundra. She didn't know about anything else. But her sister, Nadia, she had been to school in a Soviet village, or now Russian village, and they are 9 months a year at schools, and then at the tundra the rest of the year. So they are not learning the old tradition as they did before. And Nadia was going to be a designer. Vika didn't know what that was, in a way. And it's very difficult to make people stay at the tundra because, especially the girls, they see the modern life and they want to do something else. And the men are there alone, and it's difficult to find a wife. So the culture is more or less dying out, not only because of the industries coming closer, but also because people choose something else. And you could see how the modern life are coming into their life. So I started to make objects that are wearable, like jewelry, so that this one is Vika, photos of Vika. So when you wear that piece, you in a way honor her. It's a tribute to her. And I continued doing that, make tribute to this culture. So here are the woman and the child. I saw several children adapting to the wind and the nature, and they were standing there sleeping, just leaning towards their mother or towards a wire or something. So I took all these small photos of the women that I met, the women which are really the culture bearers from Nenets, and archived them in a jewelry piece. And to make you see how the jewelry pieces look like at models, it was a fun exhibition in Russia. They wanted to go on the catwalk with my pieces, and I thought that was a great idea. So there were some Russian models walking around with the objects, and afterwards the objects were in an exhibition on podiums. And it was kind of symbolic to see the models going around with all these Nenets women, that this culture is so suppressed in Russia, but at the same time so important for us globally to know about when you think about climate change and all these global issues that are important to us not to forget. So here there's a Nenets man having been out to collect some reindeers, and there's the Sami language saying, "I am tundra." And there's their homes. And the sledges was really a very important object, or what you should say, for the people. And there are all my needs under the reindeer leather. I visited another place and saw another sledge and called it Modern Times, because at that place, it was not at Kapkaninskaya Tundra, but they had got television in the lavos, in their tents. And on this, what? Is it okay? What? Okay, it's something else coming up on the side. What? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you can see the parabol antenna on the sledge. So they have the modern time coming to the Nenets area. The sledge was used to having the children's clothes for drying. So this is called drying rack. And there you also see the plastic and the wooden button on the part from the sledge. So they use whatever they have. And some food came to the tundra in plastic boxes. And then the plastic became part of the decoration on the sledge and on the clothes. So that's also a kind of a symbol for me that the modern life is coming into the culture more and more. And there's also a part of the sledge on a jewelry piece. And what I do for making these objects, it's the women techniques. It's crocheting mostly, the objects you have seen. I use weaving, crocheting, and knitting. And it really takes time. And today we are too busy. We don't have time. And even if we are in the elevator, we press this button saying the doors have to move faster together because we have so little time. But in these cultures, time is not an issue. You take the time it takes. And when you are sitting crocheting, it's also a meditative thing. And yeah, so in many ways it's symbolic, the techniques also. And the objects also gives us like this, birch bushes. You can see maybe how the objects are motivated, but of what I saw. And there's another piece called Father. It's the elements from the men, from the sledges. And maybe this is what we should do, follow the reindeer and listen to the song of the wind. So that's my artwork these days. And Knut, you also wanted me to say something about my curatorial practice, but we could take it later. I don't know how much time I've used. I didn't write down anything, so I've just been talking.
I think if you take a couple of minutes to talk about your curatorial practice, I think that's really interesting for everybody to hear.
Yeah, I'm part of an international producer and curator group in Kirkenes, my hometown, in the northeast of Norway. And it's an international group. There's a guy coming from Australia, one girl from Germany, from Leipzig, and we are a couple of Norwegian and one Russian. And we work with art cooperation across the borders in the north, and it's really valuable. There's many people who says that you shouldn't talk to the Russians, cooperate with the Russians before the Russians start behaving. I don't agree about that. I think the work we do with cross-border cooperation, it's peace building. And it's also very fun when it comes to doing art together. We come from so many different traditions, and the multicultural societies across the board is really interesting. So we do a lot of valuable stuff together. We have a residency program. We invite around 50 artists from different fields every year to come to our hometown. And we travel in the Barents region together and make artwork, which we exhibit. We have a gallery called Terminal B, where we make exhibitions of the art that is made during the stays or after the stays in our area. And we have a festival. It's called, as you mentioned before, Barents Spectacle. It goes on every February. Matti was there. Matti was there this year. And we had 5 days of art together. And it's a conceptual thing. Like this year, we called our town the world's northernmost Chinatown. And that's because the Chinese have started to be very interested in the High North. And they have this new Silk Road program. And they are going to use the Northeast Passage to make the road to China shorter and transport goods through our area, where Kirkenes is going to have a very important role with railway connection to Rovaniemi in Finland. So it's very interesting for us to see how many Chinese people are coming in the tourist industry, but also people that works with harbors and different other stuff. So what we did these 5 days, we changed our hometown into the world's northernmost Chinatown, and invited a lot of artists from the Barents region and outside to comment on the issue. So they came to our region and traveled in our residency program first, and then they made art products to show people. And it was not only good comments, it was critical comments, but both. And it had to do with China's innovative way of doing technology, for instance, but also critical issues towards the Chinese regime. So I think it was quite fun. I don't know what you think, Matti. But maybe it's enough from me. And Rose-Marie?
Always interesting to hear you, but perhaps.
This is my life. The life in a reindeer herder's family. The reindeers provide me with the materials that I use today in my art. In 1984, I got a scholarship to do some experiments with reindeer hide, because I used to work with reindeer hides traditionally, making bags and so on. After years of destroying and throwing away a lot of good materials, and my mother was not happy, she was almost crying. I destroyed so many materials. After those years, I developed my own technique to work with reindeer hides. So this is a result of my experiments. It looks like stone, but it's not stone, it's reindeer hide. And the piece is called Saito. And in the middle, I use seal skin as a contrast. So it's like a black hole that goes in. So, is it reindeer skin, hide, or is it something else? When you look at the pieces, many people don't know, they are not sure. And when they are putting up exhibitions, for example, the people that are working with it, they take the pieces and think that it's very, very, very heavy, but they are not. Ashas. I made this piece for the Lillehammer Olympic Games in 1988. 1994 in their art program. And here I am also experimenting with reindeer hair to make it very hard. And in these 4 pieces, I have put some small little objects to remind of something that is hidden inside. And then I have used a horse tail to make this round sacred in the middle, where there is earth and salt, like a pyramids. And this is Genna. And many times people think that I use Sami names, but they are not Sami names. But if you know the Sami, you get some hint of what I'm thinking about. And in the middle there is a hole with black fur. And if you put your hand inside the hole, you feel something there. Something unexpected, maybe. I live in Kiruna, where the world's largest underground iron mine is. And today, the whole town is going to move because of the mine. So we have already started to pull down a lot of buildings. And I think in 10 years, then I have to move also from the building that I live in today. And living in that town, there is a lot of iron pieces. And I used to go and pick up these iron pieces, and I love the rusty iron. And this is a piece called Govchas, where I also have goat's hair and fiber. So it looks very soft, and yet it is iron. So here is the exhibition at the Tromsø Art Museum. You see these pieces. This piece is called Objects for Research. How longer? For many years I have worked to get our Sami human remains back from museums and institutions. And they are still doing a lot of research on us. And here we have 15 cases with skulls looking at the earth in the middle, wanting to be buried again to the graves where they were stolen from. And then there is one case that is empty, and that worries people. And they're asking me why. Why? They are still doing research on us. Maybe it's my skull that is ending up in that case. And I believe and I know that there are also Sami skulls here in France. There was a French expedition who came to Sapmi, and they got a lot of skulls and took them to France. Yeah. This is a detail of the work. The 9th of August, there is going to be a re-burying ceremony of 25 skulls in Lycksele. And that will be a very emotional moment for me. Here I am working with a piece called Ahku's 498 treasures. I used to save pieces of textiles, and my Ahku also used to save everything. And in each of these small parcels, I have put Sami history, written Sami history. And there is Ahku's, it's called chest in English, yes. And Ahku used to have these small little parcels in her chest. And when we were kids, when she opened this chest, and we were very anxious to see if she was going to open one of her little parcels and see what was inside. And in one of the parcels, she had the golden coin she got from the King of Sweden. And this is my last picture with my Ahku and all her parcels, treasures. Thank you. And I give the floor to Matti Aikio.
Yes. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here, Knut. And shall I jump here? Yeah. Okay. And I'm not going to talk so long, but I am a Sami artist from reindeer herding background. I work with a lot of different medias. I work with sound art, video art, installations, photography, sometimes sculptural installations, and so on. And one of my latest works was more performative discussion on the topic of indigenous traces. But I will now show not a work. It's not the ready work, but it's parts of my a work in progress that I'm actually at the moment installing in another exhibition in southern Finland, and it will be a multi-screen video installation. I like to work in a way that I don't tell a story like a film, like a filmmaker, but I build a space where the spectator can walk inside and kind of create his or her own reading of the multiple screens or projections and so on. So now I just quickly edited some material and together for which includes clips and materials from these different channels. Let's see if I can put it on now. And then we can talk later a little bit more, possibly if there's time also for questions, what this project is about or attempting to, what kind of thinking it's attempting to approach.
Vai nää täällä väikkellä hui arkkitesot pouttuu solulle mähtselli. Hatta pitää matka. Se kolle heijuu näin täällä virna tällä huirassilla. Tänne takaa hauluu parkku. Hatta ole jo päivää laitsaa tapa vuohtaa ennen ellit. Kolle takaa täälläkin ne vuohtaa. Hatta ole kuin hauruiko lassaanan tämä mähtselli. Outalle sieltä valteita paiteita muahti kun leemasta kalteihin unniitan. Ahte tällaille mahkekkaan tarpaan loppi hiesi. Tää hietsää toulle rihotnekin. Ahte mun manka häispäin jäänäkin pohtaa. Jos tämän mannaa rikottiin, tää kalmassaa puhut peuruja ja vielä johkaan. Kun ihan niin, että ruohtaa, kun manka kuoskina parrollakaan ve pyyttäisikin, man täälläkin pyytit. Täytyykö vaipadit tämän poutsuja? Te manni musta pessä jaski. Kun pessä ne katsee kun jaski tjäpihin, se hat tälläkin falmas. Ja tiellä vaan siihen valmonne. Oi, mie pelonttuu skorruulla päältä naita. Tälle vähän aikaa suhtaudet sillä. Tämä jälleen niinku kivsiä poukku. Mutta ei väijä. Tai laakait meiltä kuin meitä. Kun ajatte nuunnaan te loppiin ja loukkuta ja kuokkatama hattu koitte. Ja lökkä raiki ja ei puhu kerkka. Tän pyytiin hammi. Mutta vähän vaattaa. Tai tahko innu vaattiis.
Ja minä muistan silloin niihin aikoihin, kun turistit ja muut kyseli Lapin ihmisiltä, meidän ihmisiltä, että mikä se teidän koti on, kotiseutu, niin ne saattoi vastata kaikki nämä tunturit, koko tämä alue. Se saattoi olla semmoinen hämmentävä vastaus, kun ihmiset, jotka kyseli, ne oli tottuneet siihen, että heillä oli hyvin tarkasti määritelty pieni paikka, joka oli heidän kotipaikkansa. Ja nämä vaan suurellisesti sanoo, että kaikki nämä tunturit. Mutta se oli ihan totta.
Minäkin olen ollut hukkia paimenessa. Kun oli hukkia, niin piti, kun aikuiset ihmiset ei joutanut, niillä oli paljon porohommia, niin ei kukaan puhunut siitä, että niitä hukkia pitäisi ruveta tappamaan, vaan silloin pestattiin, me mielellämme lapset lähimme sinne laavulle, missä laavu pystytettiin sinne sen talvitokan viereen niin, että ne voi, kun hukat tulee, niin ne turvastui ihmisiin ja laukkoi sen laavun kahta puolta yöllä, kun hukat tuli. Niin sinne yöksi pantiin aina, ja oli halukkaita, oli lapsia, jotka lähti koululaisia, jotka...
Okay, so now we saw a few clips. The first one was more, it's basically the same topic that I've been working for a long time, and the later clip was a clip of a film that has also actually been, the longer version has been, or the shorter version has been shown at some festivals as a film, which is 7 minutes long, but the original long version was like 30 minutes, where one of the aspects of the film was also time and this kind of slow tempo of storytelling and elaborating with the landscapes and this rhythm passing on and on. But basically, maybe I put one picture here in the background while I talk, and with that you can look at. That's an example of one of the installations that I had that actually had the 3 parts. Also, it was a film in a black box and a photo installation, plus this outdoors sculptural installation that was more like my attempt of claiming the landscape in a northern Norwegian town where there has been some conflicts between the Sami population and the Norwegian population, and a lot of Norwegian industrial development that is causing a lot of trouble for the Sami reindeer herders and so on. So this was also like way of like maybe somehow decolonizing the landscape. But okay, but we don't need to talk more about that work. But what these video clips were from, the project has had many different names, which are maybe still some way more like working titles, and it's a topic that I've been working for a long time, and now I'm making a new version of it in southern Finland at the Mäntä art festival, and it's somehow some kind of an attempt to try to understand like this conflict between the Sami indigenous worldview and culture and livelihood, together with that conflict between the Sami reindeer herding culture and the Nordic nation states, because I don't need to talk about any specific country, because the issues are the same in each country. It's the Sami people are always sort of squeezed in between these two kind of schizophrenic opposite state perspectives towards nature. On the other hand, the Nordic nation states are seeing our lands, our Sami lands, as an resource that can be exploited endlessly, and on the other hand, it's being seen as an untouched nature which has to be protected like an image, like a picture, where the state controls and decides what should be in that picture. And the Sami people who have been in the area for 10,000 years don't fit. They're sort of squeezed in between these two different nature relationships. And this is the interesting question that I'm really trying to look into, also by using storytelling of my own Sami elders, which I think is really important also because this kind of elders in every indigenous communities are really important figures in passing knowledge, passing information to the next generations, and so on and so on. And also, like, I'm trying, like, through their language and through their narratives to make the sort of, not to tell my message directly, but to try to kind of like open it up slowly. What is it? What are we talking about when we're talking about indigenous people's relationship to nature? What can it mean? Why is it different? Why is it always in conflict with nation states? To put it short, or should I talk more? One more thing. These pictures are from another multi-screen video installation that I had on the same topic. So we can just quickly see if you. Sometimes I work like this, with these kind of spaces. But okay, thank you.
Well, oh no, we are not letting you out quite yet. But it was applause was for you, of course. I think we should wrap things up. I think they want us out of the room within something like 15 minutes. But I think this has been a very interesting afternoon. We have heard about the background, historical background, the background in duodji, traditional craftsmanship. We have heard about how artists use different kind of techniques, Rosa Maria, based on duodji, but moving into installations, moving into space, Inger, you with your portable sculptures that refers to migration, and you, Matti, with your video works taking up conflicts relevant to the area. And I think what is mutual for all of you, all these strong artist works, is that they all take up questions related to Sami society or Northern society. Some of them are related specifically to the Sami people. I think your work with the lacking skull was very, very strong, Rosa Maria. I was really, I cannot speak even, and but I think it is important that these things are being said. There will be, I think, a panel on restitution here where you will participate, and Mai is that tomorrow, I think. So this is definitely a forum to bring these things up. But you also mentioned climate change, Inger, and you talked about the industrial challenges. So I'd like to ask you all a question before perhaps Anna-Mai, anyone else on the panel has a question, before we perhaps have a question or two from the audience. Which part can the artist play in all of this? You know, whether it's the global problem, climate change, or the more geographic problem of industrialization, or the ethical problems about how the Sami people has been and is treated. Anyone who would like to comment on that? Would you start?
Yeah, it's a tough but important question. I don't know if I'm actually answering the right question, but it's sort of what it brought into my mind was a little bit. I'm going a little bit around it because I feel that, you know, what I think it's totally connected to Knut's question, but I feel that in my art, like what is like one of the problems that I'm trying to solve, and I think this is connected to what Knut was asking, is that I feel, I have this feeling that the big problem is that there is this, if I quote the famous Sami artist Nils Valkeapää, he wrote already 30 years ago that we do not even exist, we are invisible, they can walk right over us, and I think it's still the same. I think it has not changed, and in a way what I'm trying to do, one of the things that I'm trying to do with my work is to try to somehow use the art to kind of show that we are still existing, we are still real, and this is the and that way to try to open that space for the indigenous voice, also for talking about, for example, the challenges of climate change, which actually, there was another clip in my video where we also, because it's a long video, but it's not shown there, where the old man that I'm interviewing, he's telling a lot about the challenges of the climate change in today's reindeer herding this winter, for example, how difficult it has been, and so on. Sorry, long answer, and maybe to the wrong question.
Well, you could say a lot of things about that question. I think that it's very good that the Sami voices now is heard around, and that Documenta also had some visitors from the Sami Artist Communion. And when we as a curator group in the North invite artists in to comment on issues that has to do with the North, it's always a lot of Sami artists among the ones we invite. And we don't invite them because they are Sami artists, but because they are artists that has something to say about issues that are globally important. And I think that if you invite artists in to comment on something and let them work with money, I mean, the most important issue for an artist is that a lot of things they do are unpaid. And it's important that artists are invited to be able to comment. And when they do, and take the site-specific works, work locally, it has global importance when you comment in the North, because the North and what's happening up there and in the indigenous communities, and in the Northeast Passage, it has global interest. And I think it's very important that you get the art out to the people, and that it's not only presented in the white cubes where the art-interested audience are, because you have to get people to see and reflect.
I work with different themes. After the Chernobyl catastrophe, I made a whole exhibition because that affected the reindeer herders very much. And then I have made installations about all the wars around the world. So it depends on what's in my mind, because I don't reflect only on what is going on in the Sami community.
Mai, would you like to comment or add something?
Well, in my profession, traditional knowledge, arbeidet, it's quite important. So I want to know if, I want to ask the artist actually, when you're working with your art in different kind of material and perspectives, are the traditional knowledge important in your work? And I like to ask Rosemarie especially about the picture, the art, and thinking that every package, it's a treasure for the people to come from the people that have been. So I'd like to hear what the artists are thinking about that.
As I told you before, I have put a piece of Sami history in each package. So if somebody, say 100 years from now, opens one of the packages, they will see what was written about us in our time.
Yeah, the traditional knowledge is important in what we are doing, and also to point on the traditions is some of the things I do in the Nanets project, for instance.
Yeah, I can also say that the traditional knowledge is really important for my work, and I also use it. Part of my work is also collecting and using it, but it's not really at the core of my work, but it's definitely included.
Should we open for questions from the audience? I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience, if there is an interest. I see Franz Nerlich.
Thank you very much to all of you for presenting your work and your very thrilling approach of arts, culture, and knowledge as well. And I wanted to ask Inger about her work with the Nanets. As you were saying that the women were the cultural bearer. Is there yes, in what way are they destined or meant to be the mediator or the bearer of culture? And is there a gendered relation to art and culture also in the Sami tradition? And how is this dealt with in the nowadays artistic world and issues? I don't know if my question was clear, but it was very very interesting when you presented your work. And it raised some of these questions.
I didn't get it all, but when it comes to why the women are the culture bearers, I mean, they pass on the knowledge to the children, and they are more at the place where they live, whilst the men are out doing the reindeer herding. They have different tasks in the community, and what lacks now, for instance, in the Nenets area, when the children are sent to school, they have to go to school 9 months a year, and the women are not there to tell them about the culture. There is so much philosophy, so much knowledge, so much craftsmanship, and it's the same in the Sami population, of course. So the Sami women and the Nenets women are culture bearers, as of course are the men, but the women pass a lot over to the children. And yeah, I don't know if I answered everything. I didn't understand all English you said.
Yes, would anyone else on the panel comment on this, or before we have the next question, or? Det var lite om gender. Okay, yes, let's have the next.
First of all, thank you for all the presentations that were really interesting. And also I'm really impressed because it's the first time that I met some women where they're herders, so I'm really happy for that. And also I was wondering, because I study slash and burn in Sweden, and the relation between Sami when they're herders and forest managers. And I was wondering, because you talk about climate change, and I was wondering about if there is some Sami artists that talk about the links between slash and burns and lichens, and the fact that the food for reindeer disappear, and so that's all that I would like. I don't know if I was clear enough. That the winter grasses for reindeers disappear because of slash and burns, and if Sami artists talk about that. Slash and burns. Using burn woods when for burns for forestry management. When you use fire in the forestry management.
If I remember what was the actual question again, but they don't really use that kind of technique, at least as far as I know anymore. But it doesn't matter. I mean, but it's more the clear cuttings have been a huge issue and still are, and it's still something that is debated a lot. For example, in Finland now, they just formed a new government in Finland, and this has been a huge national political discussion that how much can Finland afford to cut down forests and still fulfill like our climate policies according to the Paris Agreement, for example. And we, of course, our representatives from the Sami parliament and from our side, we are saying that they're anyways like cutting way too much, because the forest industry was already for 100 years so heavy that it's done so much damage. But as a climate question, it's a huge question at the moment. It's a huge topic. especially in Sweden and Finland, not so much in Norway because of the geography. Did I answer your question?
I'm thinking about the forest issue. Well, we live in an area that doesn't have that much forest. It's tundra. That was the English word, yeah. So we don't have that issue at all. But actually, it's been in some areas, like in Karasjok, it's a valley, and there have been some forest. Well, they are taking woods for industry, or what do you call it? But in our area now, it's actually it's growing too much. So maybe we should start to do something about the growing, because the agriculture is getting less and less. So it's getting more and more woods, more and more trees. So probably have another perspective. I have a problem understanding your question in the beginning, but I thought that maybe it's the climate areas and the subarctic area that we're living have some other perspectives. But I think about the other question was about the women and tradition. What was that question? But if I understand that question right, I'm not so sure about that. But the women have an important part of the Sami societies. They are giving the knowledge to the children. The men are often in the in the mountains, and the kids are staying at home. So the women have a lot of important roles in the reindeer herding families. But I'm not so sure about that. Was it that? Okay, yeah. And we have the important, because the tradition are given by doing things together. Like I was working with my grandmother, I was doing things with her. I learned by doing, not reading and what do you call it, the school knowledge. You have to be there to expire it. You have to be there to get it through your hands. It's not only words. If you are going to make the tradition live and go forth and go. English is difficult. Well, it's been a long day. Yeah, that too. But I think that we all have a very important part. I'm a little bit of a museum person, of course. So we all have a little part of giving to the next generation. And I think that at the Sami side, we are more we have a conscience about that. So we actually are working with that all the time. So I think that tradition and knowledge, and I also think one of the points asking the artist, I'm going to finish soon. I asked that because I wanted to know if they use the tradition and knowledge in it, and actually if they think that the tradition and knowledge can be given to the next generation through art. And I actually think that it is possible, because you're making it live through another in another way. You can use it in more than one way, and when you make it usable, what do you call it? Usable? In different kind of ways, you actually make sure that people will, or the next generation will actually use it in more different ways. I don't know if that got perfect in English, but in my mind it was.
I think we should wrap things up. Okay, so if you think we have time for one more, I think people are very hot and want their wine, but yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentations and your work and your commitment. I've seen so many similarities in what you said with other indigenous communities, and especially with northern indigenous communities such as the Inuit, in terms of colonial history, traditional knowledge, traditional skills, and denial of this expertise by the nation state and by the Western world. And I was also thinking that I think a few days ago there was the Arctic Arts Summit in Rovaniemi, in which participated Sami artists, Inuit artists, and other indigenous communities. So my question was just, how do you envision the future in terms of collaboration with other indigenous communities and in terms of decolonial practices and how to decolonize thinking and the arts? Thank you.
Jeg tror poenget her handler om andre etniske grupper, urbefolkningsgrupper, parallellene, og hvordan kan man samarbeide om å overbringe disse erfaringene. Jeg tror en av dere må svare, men vi kan ikke ha... Hvem føler seg kallet? Du, yes, Matti.
Okay. Well, it's of course hard to say how we see the future, but the thing is that we are already, of course we are collaborating a lot, and of course more, and we, especially in the Nordic hemisphere, the Arctic indigenous peoples, which I somehow connect to also to the history of this kind of indigenous political collaboration. I think it's very much also connected to that, and maybe the art world came like right after the indigenous politicians started collaborating, at least already in 1970s, if not earlier. But and this definitely is important for all indigenous communities, that we can come together every time we meet in different parts of the world. We are just talking about this, that how similar issues we are facing and how we are, exactly like you said in your question, and we're working with the same topics. So of course this is super important for ourselves, that we can have this kind of dialogue and try to think together how to work on these topics.
Okay, I think we need to wrap things up. I thank you all for your attention. The artists are here, so you can talk to them later during the weekend. As mentioned, Anne-Mai will also participate in a panel tomorrow, so you can hear more about restitution of Sami objects. And as Judith mentioned, there is a piece on Sami art and artists in the last number of Perspective in French, so if you're interested, you can read more about it. Thank you.